Hey everybody, James Introcaso here. Before we start the show, I just wanted to let you know that DSPN is currently doing a listener survey. You can help us grow our network. Let us know what shows you're loving, what kind of content you want to hear more of, and help us figure out what sort of advertisers we should be reaching out to. It is a huge help for us if you fill out this survey. Just head on over to don'tsplittthepodcastnetwork.com and click on the link on the left that says Listener Survey. When you fill out the survey, you also get a chance to be entered to win a free copy of the Wizards of the Coast D&D 5th edition adventure, Tomb of Annihilation. It is amazing. So do not wait. Go ahead, fill out our survey today. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am welcoming back game designer Doug Cole to talk about his Kickstarter for Dragon Heresy and to talk all about his amazing work cutting apart and putting back together 5th edition D&D. You may remember Doug from our talk about Dungeon Grappling, his other Kickstarted product. Dragon Heresy is on Kickstarter right now, and it's already funded. If you want to check it out, go to Kickstarter, search for Dragon Heresy. Without further ado, here is Doug Cole. So everybody, now I am here with the one and only Douglas Cole. Welcome back to Tabletop Babble. It is great to have you here, Doug. For those who may not have heard previous episodes and who aren't familiar with your work, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Awesome. Thanks for the welcome. It's great to be back. So my name's Douglas Cole. I run a very small company, just me, called Ballistic. And thus far, I have done a whole bunch of writing for GURPS. And over the last 2 years, I started the Gaming Ballistic as a company and published a couple of small supplements, one called Dungeon Grappling, which brought grappling rules for a couple of different editions, Pathfinder, Swords and Wizardry, and 5th edition. Grappling rules to these games that, how can I put it properly, don't suck. And there's a story behind it, but we don't really need to go into it. But that was my first Kickstarter and delivered PDF a month early, print 3 months early, and has done fairly well for me since. You know, I'm not going and quitting my day job because of a 52-page book on grappling, but on a project basis, it's done quite well. And then I followed that up with Lost Hall of Tyr, which was an attempt to turn a dungeon grappling linear adventure that I ran for Gen Con as a demonstration vehicle. I tried to turn that into a published adventure. Well, I did turn it into a published adventure. It hasn't done as well. I learned a lot from it, though, both in terms of layout, marketing, what appeals, what doesn't. All of that was a run-up to a game that's been in the works for the better part of 2 years. It's why I started Gaming Ballistic, called Dragon Heresy. And Dragon Heresy should kickstart a week from tomorrow. And that would be April 2nd, because I think launching it on April 1st is just a little on point.
And we should mention right now for our listeners, if you're listening to this podcast the day it drops or a couple days after, it's already happening. The Kickstarter is there. So you're going to want to check it out because we're going to be doing a lot of talking about Dragon Heresy. I've had the privilege, just so the listeners have the background, of being part of a group of people who Doug has sort of run ideas by and stuff. I have not heavily participated in that group, but I have had the pleasure of reading the conversations and seeing what's going on back and forth between sort of this genius group of people that you've put together, people who really understand game design in a granular, amazing, awesome, detailed way. So let's talk about a little bit what Dragon Heresy is exactly. If people out there have never heard of it, don't know what it is, what is Dragon Heresy?
So at the very highest level, setting and world building and all the detail stuff aside, Dragon Heresy is an evolution of SRD 5.1. It's based on the engine that powers, a game that has been so popular it's sold more copies in its fourth year than its first year, which is astounding and worthy of a show on itself. But that would just be a bunch of people sitting around saying, "Wow, I can't believe that." It's a great engine, and it's very modular, and it's obviously very popular. But there are a couple areas where I felt that it squeaked around the edges, and in a couple different conversations with people, I realized that it would be possible to kind of make all of that misgiving go away with a few things. The first was a conversation with James Spahn, White Box guy, White Star and a few other things. He and a few other people were talking about shields and how shields really ought to be cooler than a +1 or +2 to armor class. +1 if you're playing old school games, +2 if you're in the new stuff. I think up to +4 if you're playing Pathfinder. But shields are pretty passive. Yeah, you can sort of bash with them, but my experience in Western martial arts, specifically Viking martial arts, has the shield as the primary weapon. You're always doing something with the shield, whereas you're actually rarely doing something with the sword, which is very backwards to how almost every game I've ever played goes. Some things you just can't go do. Most fights are a lot of watching and a few furious seconds of combat. Well, that's boring as all get out. So you don't want to go full realism, right? No, what is it from the Tropic Thunder? Don't go full realism. But so that was one thing. Sort of one of the pillars is making player decisions on the defensive options a little more exciting. The other was really I have a friend of mine, Tim Shorts, who runs the Gothridge Manor blog and the Manor zine, and he had this epic rant one day about fighting till within an inch of your life, and then you go take a short or a long rest, and it's like your mommy kisses you, and all of your orc stabby wounds are all better. And independently to the fact that later on I discovered this has been done before, I was like, well, what if you separated things into, like, if you treated hit points as active defenses, but you weren't actually bleeding until you got wounded. And so the vigor and wounds column of Dragon Heresy was sort of the second pillar of things. Then, because some of the fights that I've done in D&D came down to just a case of hit point ablation, and I realized this as I was really evolving dungeon grappling and other things, but you get into this hit point slog, and one of the areas that obviously my blog deals with or has dealt with a lot in the past is firearms. And, I don't care if you're a 20th level barbarian, if you get a bullet to the head, you're going to die, and you're going to die right then. And so the nice thing about the wounds and vigor track was that it solves what I call the hit point problem, whereas that if you are unaware of an attack and you get hit by some powerful thing, you can just go down, and it restores some of the fragility and risk to high level characters, which was a design goal of what was going to be a reasonably gritty setting. Oh, yeah, and then one of the more important parts about it is it changes a little bit the nature of the hit roll. The hit roll is still 1d20 plus a bonus, but the target numbers are a little different. You've got a lower level target number that I call threat DC, which is if you're under the threat DC, you just miss. And then there's a buffer between the threat DC and the hit DC, and if you meet or exceed the hit DC, then you've bypassed whatever defenses the other person has, and the hit DC scales with proficiency and level. So it bypasses whatever defenses you have, and you just hit the person. But then your armor comes into play. So armor is resolved as damage reduction rather than an increase in difficulty to hit. Shields, on the other hand, do increase your difficulty to hit. They increase your threat DC because they're denying angles and stuff. So that's kind of it changes the play of the game a little bit because you always have to worry about that lucky blow. Now there is a rules mechanism, a bit of a get out of jail free card, where you can sort of throw yourself aside. It's called a Frantic Defense, and accept a trade-off at like 2 for 1. So if you roll 10 points of damage and you roll a really good roll and you're over my hit DC, if I'm not wearing armor, I would normally take 10 wounds, which will kill a normal man. But if I accept 20 vigor, I throw myself out of the way, and I have to use my reaction to do it. So I only get 1 lucky save each turn. But I can throw myself out of the way and then keep fighting. But if it makes getting dogpiled really scary because you can only get out of jail free once, and it also makes those first couple of wounds pretty risky. So that's kind of the pillars of the Dragon Heresy from a mechanics standpoint. Getting into the setting, it's basically fantasy Vikings. I got into it because there were certain things that I wanted to do. And in some of the early play tests, someone wanted to be a cleric, and what should we do? And I was like, oh, I just saw Thor yesterday, so let's do the Norse mythology. And that was just kind of fun. But then as I really started to get into Norse mythology and the things that I wanted to do with the setting, I realized that my notions for the setting had recreated accidentally some of the fundamentals of Norse mythology. Dragons and elves being really like old wicked elves, not tra la la singing in the forest elves. So these are the ones where if you are trying to get water from your well and you don't prick your hand and make a little blood sacrifice to the well, then they're going to kill your livestock or poison your well or something, right? So the Fae in mythology were not shiny, happy Tinkerbell elves. They were like, kill your family and freeze you to death and laugh while it's happening, or take you to a Fae dimension for 1,000 years where you don't age, but the whole world passes you by, kind of thing. So it returns to some of that. There's a lot. I wanted dragons, and the heresy thing was kind of started as a joke, just like sort of like GURPS, I guess. Started as a joke because all of what I was doing was like, oh, it's heretical D&D, but then I managed to work the heresy into the backstory. So that's kind of the evolution of Dragon Heresy from a mechanics and a world building standpoint. The other thing, I guess, about it, and then I'll turn the show back to the interviewer, is the other thing about it is that it grew up in a time right as the OGL and SRD 5.1 were coming out. So initially, I was just going to start doing some D&D stuff on my blog, and you can see if you go to gamingballistic.com, there are some posts called Heretical D&D from a couple years ago, and they lay out some of the fundamentals of the system. And then Wizards came out with the Dungeon Masters Guild and said, "Oh yeah, you can publish this stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And so, but as I was writing it, I realized that because of the nature of the changes, you'd have to stop the game every 35 seconds to adjust something on the fly. But then, like the next week, they said, "Oh, and by the way, here's 200,000 words of awesome mechanics that you can reuse and republish as part of a system reference dictionary." And yes, third-party publishing is fully supported using either the Dungeon Masters Guild or the Open Game License. And I chose the OGL, and all of a sudden, what was 15,000 words grew to 150,000, and then 300,000, and now it's the whole thing is 410,000 words. But that's not what's kickstarting right now, because 400,000 words is like you need like 150 grand to do that right. And so I've cut it down to the Dragon Heresy introductory set, which is level 1 through 5 of wizard, cleric, fighter, berserker, and a couple of the races: humans, dwarves, who are not, my dwarves are not small bearded Scotsmen, they're a little different, dragonborn, because they're important to the setting, and half elves, because the elves are a little different, and they're a little hard to grasp. Not too hard, but the cultures of each of these peoples is unique and distinct, and the human culture and the dwarf culture to some extent, but the human culture is based on the Vikings, because the Vikings were the original old school gamers. You only got to be an awesome Viking by getting on a ship and going somewhere and killing people and taking their stuff, which is, the plot line of almost every old role-playing game ever. And as much as people want to say, oh, well, that was unrealistic or that's so shallow or whatever, that was basically, 95% of Vikings were farmers, right? So, but the 5 or 10% who were heroes and had epic sagas written about them and told about them were basically player characters in a D&D game. And the more that I dug into it, the more that I realized that was true. And I wanted people to be able to experience that and appreciate that, because it's an interesting, unique culture that I've sort of discovered through my martial arts training and reading about it and stuff. And it's fun to play in. And it gets back to a kind of very basic mode of play. And the game is structured around that kind of rating and prestige play, and your whole mission in life is to go do heroic deeds so that Woden and the gods of Asgard will approve of you. And so a lot of pretty nifty knock-on effects flow from there. So that's kind of what Dragon Heresy is. And I'd say it's in a nutshell, but it's like a Brazil nut. It's a big no.
That's really cool. And it sounds like, so, you at first you sort of talked about the mechanics. You wanted to get in there. You wanted to hack 5th edition to have these sort of more crunchy combat mechanics that still work in interesting, fun, awesome storytelling ways and maintain the spirit of 5th edition while allowing you to actually do more in the game without getting like crazy complicated, which I love.
Yes. And I want to I want to just break in and emphasize that, because this is not Champions. It's not GURPS. It's not something with 400 pages of detailed rules. It plays like 5th edition. It's fast. And you can make a character the same amount of time as 5th edition, which is here's 6 stats from an array, assign them, and go. So it's fast to play and easy to understand. So I actually give just ridiculous credit to the 5th edition designers on this one, because you can hang a lot of modular stuff from the 5th edition pegboard and not damage the game at all.
Yeah. I think that's true. It's made for add-ons and modules and switches and things like that to be pulled and pushed, and I love that about it. And when you sort of stumbled upon this Viking setting, like you were talking about, did it also make sense because there was such an emphasis on melee combat in your system? Is that another reason why a sort of Viking flavored themed setting made sense? Because I imagine you wouldn't want a world filled with wizards slinging spells at each other if you had all these rules for shield and armor and throwing yourself to the side when you take a crazy blow and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the emphasis on personal combat is stronger in a setting where your fighters and your berserkers are a really dominant force. That being said, it didn't take much to make the spell slingers equally interesting, and I could have done more, but at the time that I was really putting it together, that wasn't my design goal.
So let's talk then a little bit about the spell slingers, because I do think the magic too is kind of an interesting way you've gone about things in this system. What did you do to make them fun and interesting?
The spells are really unchanged in mechanics for the most part. I guess there's one or two critical differences. It's still saving throws, and you still have spell slots, and all of that is intimately familiar. The real difference is that a lot of the spells, when you'll roll, their damage is a little lower, because a lot of them will come in and say, okay, I cast a fireball, and instead of 8d6, it's 4d6. But the thing is that if you fail your saving throw, that goes directly to wounds. And if you make your saving throw, you get to take it as vigor. And your frantic defense option, I think in some cases still applies. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that basically is an analog, right? You would normally take 8d6 hit points if you fail your save, and 4d6 if you make your save. So that's the same, right? If you make your save, that 4d6 as vigor is the same as what it would be. The difference is if you happen to find yourself in the center of a fireball that you can't get out of, you're likely to turn into a crispy critter.
Awesome.
Right then. Well, yeah, because if you're a normal strength 10, con 10 person, your wounds are your constitution plus your strength bonus, because the bigger they are, the harder you hit. So with let's give sort of player character averages with a con 12 and a strength of 12 or something like that. So you'd have 13 wounds. So if you get hit for 14 or more, you're dead. You're dying. And if you get hit for if you pass the double your wound maximum, which would be at that point if you take 27 wounds, not only are you dead, you're instantly dead. You're dead right then. You're not in the saving throw mode where you're rolling a health roll every turn and you fail or succeed 3. You're just dead. You've taken so much physical damage that you just drop right then. So it is possible to, with a properly rolled spell, just to absolutely turn a whole party of things into crispy critters, and that enhances both the utility of the spells, but it also makes it scarier for everybody, right? Anything that you say, oh well, the monsters are just going to drop. Well, the monsters are attacking the player characters a lot more, right? So that's kind of what that did, and it made some of the spells a little bit more bang for the buck in terms of spell slots. And I think what that wound up doing in playtest was, believe it or not, it actually extends your delving lifetime, so to speak. It's not the 15-minute workday. Because an individual spell properly executed is pretty effective, you get to do more encounters before your resources are drained. Yeah, the spell system didn't change that much. There were a couple of saving throws that were added, like a spell damage save, which allowed you to avoid certain effects. But mostly, it was just a conversion of wounds to vigor. Psychic damage changed a little bit. Goes right to exhaustion rather than it goes like vigor, 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 exhaustion, because it doesn't actually hurt you. It hurts you on the inside, right? Karate Man, we bleed on the inside, but it doesn't actually cause you to bleed, and wounds are physical damage. So psychic damage first reduces your vigor, or if you fail saving throws, you take levels of exhaustion, which is, I love, love, love the exhaustion mechanics in 5th edition. The only thing that I could wish for is that there were more levels with more slightly incrementing detriment, because right now, like the first level, fine, you take it. The second level, the third level, you're at disadvantages for everything, right? And you're attacked at advantage or something like that. So that no one ever wants to take that third level of exhaustion. And I would rather something where people are like, well, I can, yeah, I'm willing to take that third level. Oh, I'm willing to take that fourth level. Oh, I'm willing to take the fifth level, and death becomes like the eighth level or something. But I haven't made that tweak. Just because I had quite enough going on with. But if there were more levels of exhaustion, each of which the marginal pain was a little lower, because right now, I think there's, in my experience, there's a real cliff where no one wants to take that third level of exhaustion. But I love the exhaustion mechanics. I like fatigue mechanics. I like that gambling feeling where you're like, oh, So that's a great mechanic. So what else is there in spells? That's I tried not to do too much with it.
Sure, and it's great, and it's awesome because it's still recognizable as 5th edition. I feel like, knowing the rules of 5th edition D&D, you're going to come in well armed into Dragon Heresy, which is great. But there's also all this new stuff, which sort of brings me to why did you choose 5th edition for this? What was sort of your impetus? Why not create a whole new system from scratch? Or, you're used to working in GURPS. Why not in GURPS? What was it about 5th edition that made you say, this is the system that I want to sort of use as the foundation for Dragon Heresy?
Part of it was I think at the time playing in a 5th edition game. I think I was playing in Rob Conley's Majestic Wilderlands campaign, and so I was getting used to it, and sort of rediscovering D&D for the first time in a long time, because I had not played. I had played maybe a game of Pathfinder once in like 2004 or something, and then way back when I played 2nd edition when I was in grad school. But it'd been a long time away from D&D, and I really liked the feel of 5th edition. Let's say that I wanted to write in GURPS. I can't. You can't do third-party publishing in GURPS, and the stuff that I might want to do, was not where Steve Jackson Games was at the time. There really was no venue to say, hey, I have an original setting and original, because we have to all remember that if you're not playing 5th edition or Pathfinder, the market kind of dropped out from the, hey, I have something that's going to be awesome and go and sell a zillion copies and whatever. There are people like Kevin Crawford and others who can bottle lightning, but it's really rare. And the time when you could say, oh, I've got a dungeon grappling source book and it's going to sell not just 600 copies, but it's going to sell 6,000 copies, and it's going to go 6,000 copies a year. That was the world in GURPS 3rd edition, and that world is gone. Even a great game like Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game, the box set, isn't going to be reprinted because the upfront costs grew to the point where reprints, given the sales velocity, weren't affordable. So the market is really saturated and really tight in that. So if you're going to do it, you want to do it in a system that's growing and flourishing. And 5th edition had all of that. The OGL was great. The fan base is accommodating of hacking. Right, you've got the Unearthed Arcana Reddit, where everyone's always playing around with stuff. Looking at the OSR community and the sort of the mod community, if you want to think of it that way. But people love to hack with D&D and are pretty accepting of it. And because it is a simple base that, if you read the stats, millions of people have played in any given year, it means that as long as you're rolling 1d20 plus a bonus against a target number, people get what you're doing. And so it was a natural fit. And the more that I looked into it, the more you realized how flexible the core engine was. And so it really fit my needs for the project very well.
It makes sense that you would, choose this, especially since it is, a fantasy system that has a lot in common with the game that Dungeons and Dragons is. Hey, everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know about our sponsor for this episode of Tabletop Babble. I'm talking about Kobold Press, makers of fine 5th edition and Pathfinder products. I'm talking about Deep Magic. I'm talking about the Tome of Beasts. I'm talking about the Midgard campaign setting. And right now, the Midgard campaign setting has been updated for 5e D&D. You can check out the Midgard World Book and the Midgard Heroes Handbook. The World Book is all for DMs. It's got all of the awesome world information you need. There's tons of mechanics in there as well. Plus, the setting has been advanced forward 10 years, and some cool stuff has happened. We had an episode with Wolfgang all about it that you can listen to in our Tabletop Babble archives. And then the Hero Book is all for players. That's right. You don't need to sort of say, here's the book, don't read it. Nope, there's 2 books. And the amazing Heroes Handbook has all sorts of new subclasses, all sorts of new spells, new character options. It is basically Player's Handbook 2. You should check this out, even if you're not going to run in the world of Midgard, because there are so many amazing things that you can steal and drop into any game. These are such good books. They're from Kobold Press, who playtests and has professionals working on their stuff. It is just so good. So check it out over at koboldpress.com, koboldpress.com, to get the Midgard World Book and the Midgard Heroes Handbook. All right, back to the show. So you were hacking D&D. Basically. And did you find that you hacked more or less than you initially thought?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think the trick here is that it started off was going to be a simple thing: wounds and vigor, and then the threat DC, hit DC, and then armor as damage reduction. And so that was kind of enough, and that changed the game enough to make it play differently without departing. But it didn't need that much. And so a lot of what I've done here is ripple the consequences of those actions through the game. Then the rest of the framework is really building the things that you're not given in the SRD, right? SRD gives you all the character classes, but only one archetype per. So if you want player choice, you have to write your own, and you have to write your own powers and all that stuff. So that wasn't really hacking D&D so much as delving into the expression of powers and abilities as you go through the levels. The one place I would actually say that we did the most hacking was in some of the classes. Ranger got a rework because everyone has to rework the Ranger class. Thief got a little bit. We had to because of the massive damage you can deal on a sneak attack, we had to rationalize that with wounds. Because if you're doing 10d6 wounds, you can kill almost anything in one shot, and that was not really the point. So there was a bunch of stuff that we did there. But I think I'd like to think I hacked just the right amount. I guess we'll see. No, I think it was just the right amount to do what I wanted to. And there were a couple additions that were trivial. Like there's, you have move, you have dash, and now there's sprint, because I looked at some of the running speeds that normal people could attain and what Usain Bolt could attain, and said, wow, your move is a walk. I mean, 30 feet in 6 seconds is not even a fast walk, and a dash is a trot. But if you really want to beat feet and get somewhere, you can go faster than that. But that has consequences, right? You're easy to hit. You can't make attacks. You're attacked with advantage. You lose your opportunity attack because you're too busy running. And then you can say, oh, if you want to do feats, you can say, oh, well, I'm a really practice runner, and you can go up to like 6 or 8 times your basic move. Usain Bolt runs at 8 times basic move, by the way.
Holy, well, we're all not Usain Bolts, right? That's true too.
We're not. However, we don't have to be, because like, Usain Bolt is like a 20th level runner, right? So, and that was really the thing, is that I said, okay, I wanted to make sure that you could be properly epic. You didn't have to be Captain America, although clearly the engine will support.
Mm-hmm. Sure, the peak of human achievement. If you've got that 20 strength and dex, yeah, sure.
That's right. And so, it could support that sort of thing, and a supers game based on, well, I mean, really at high level play, most Dungeons and Dragons is a superhero. At least Pathfinder and 5th edition are effectively superheroes games at high level. You're you're demigods at that point. Actually, maybe not superheroes. Demigod is the right appropriate mythological phrase, right? At that level, you're Hercules before his ascension. You're Egil from Egil Saga in the Iceland. You're the man, right? At high level play, you really need to be properly epic, and so upper bound you were. But yes, I think that overall, net, I hacked. I had a couple basic rules changes, and then just followed through with the implications of those for the rest of the rule set. One of the big problems that you run into in hacking rule sets in general is, even if any one change makes sense, when you have 496 of them, no one can play your game, right? So
Yeah.
it's even if every single rule is logical, you're always looking with your nose in a book. The mantra of the grappling system, for example, was actually bring it closer to basic combat, 1d20 against a target number, roll damage. That's a rule everyone can remember, right? And so there's really only 2 choices in a combat situation in a 5th edition D&D game. Either it's an attack roll where the strike may or may not occur, or it's a saving throw where, like, if something explodes and you're caught in the explosion, you're in that unless something happens. You make the save to get you out of the way. And those are sort of the 2 type. You've got the inevitable type where you're only trying to mitigate what will happen if you do nothing, or you have the active type where you're making a strike that could hit or miss, and then you resolve that afterwards. But those are the 2 core conflict resolution mechanisms. There's a contest too, but so if you want to throw that one in, but that's when you're both deciding to do something, you're not sure who's going to win, and it's not a your turn, my turn thing, right?
Sure.
So, okay, we'll expand it to 3. There are only 3 ways of dealing with that, and if you keep to that and you have levels for the hit of, did you do it at all? Did you do it so well that only something frantic is going to escape somebody's escape from hitting? Once you start rippling that through, it falls into place pretty well. And so with the kind of 3 mechanics to rule them all principle that was put into 5th edition from the beginning, it makes it pretty simple. And most good games are that way. Fate resolves almost everything around a 4DF roll, right?
Sure.
Even GURPS, although it's front loaded in its character generation, even GURPS is 1 or 2 or 3 resolution mechanics. 3d6 roll under, the damage roll, and then there's a reaction roll, which is 3d6 roll high instead of roll low. So there's really, and then there's a contest, which is who makes the thing by the most. So there's really only a couple core mechanics in a lot of these games that can be played well, and I definitely tried to stick to that.
Gotcha. So, I think one of the things that's interesting, right, is those 3 mechanics all revolve around rolling a d20, which is really, really cool. From a new player's perspective, it can be boiled down to like roll a 20, do a thing, right? Every time you want to do a thing that you may fail doing, you roll a d20. So, the world of Dragon Heresy, you also created this world for it. And sometimes you see people create setting books and they use a system that exists. You see people create a new system, but not necessarily a world for that system. It's very cool to see you doing both. And I know you're not the very first person to do that, but it is like 2 times the amount of effort, at least, to do that. But it also, it just gives you a place where immediately you feel like the system fits, right? You don't need to think like, oh, what world do I need to use or create that would go well with this system? You have something that the designer is telling you, I made this to go with this. And so how, in your mind, do world and system fit together? And sort of what story ideas are there that you can tell using this system?
That's a great question. I think in this particular case, you could easily file the serial numbers off of a 5th edition engine or the Dragon Heresy engine. I need a better acronym for that, like the, Heretical Universal Game Engine. It's huge, but anyway, we'll go past that. The system is tweaked to get a certain feel. If your bad guy gets lucky and rolls within his critical threshold and all of a sudden he's got a whole bunch of damage, you could just, even if you're a high level experienced guy, you have to fight smart. You can't just wade into it and expect to slog through based on a high level of ablative damage soak capacity. And I wanted something that would capture that. And the Viking stories and the Norse sagas are filled with blood and guts. And the most important thing is to die glory, become bold, be bold, take decisive action, and failing victory, at least die gloriously with weapons in hand. And so the setting was tailor-made to the feel of the game. And the Norse mythology is way, way, way richer than I had ever thought. I mean, you grow up with, Tyr's Day and Woden's Day and Thor's Day and all that stuff, Freya's Day. So you grow up with all that stuff, but you don't really, and you see the Marvel stuff with Thor and the hammer, but it's a complicated, many-layered, intricate set of stories that have within them the same underlying premise as Dragon Heresy, which is everyone can die because there's Ragnarok. At the end of it all that glory, it comes to an end. But out of that end, there's a new beginning. And so the setting and the Norse-based setting fit so well that it was really a snowball. I wanted a world, a couple things. I wanted to make a world where the basic sort of D&D premise, go north and kill things and take their stuff, what made sense. Not that it doesn't make sense in other places, but the concept of why you would do this, I wanted that to be a good reason. And it started with an internet friend of mine named Jason Packer came up with an idea for, actually it was a dungeon fantasy game, I think, saying, there's a king and he says, hey, anyone who can go into this wild land and hack out a piece of land can join the ranks of the nobility and claim it as their own. And some of the nobility of the realm that he was in were going to do this, and some of it mocked the king for such folly, and it was called Crail's Folly. But from that concept came an idea of a fairly large, it's basically the size of England or Minnesota for that matter, fairly constrained kingdom that was pressed on multiple sides. Mountains to the west, an almost ever-present invasion from the inevitable nomads from the steppes, because you have to have nomads from the steppes, constrained by a realm north of them that used to house the Dragon Empire, and it's where the ley lines of the world emerge from the core. Magic flows through the whole universe, but in this particular world, it came out in this realm called Tanalor, and where ley lines would cross, dragons would slumber, and they would go into Jotunheim, the realm of giants, when the giant is metaphor, right? They would go into Jotunheim and go through these wonderful astral journeys and become more, and they discovered a way to ascend to basically the equals of the Asgardians. And by doing all of this, they had this huge empire that eventually they ran into conflict with the Fae, and initially all they would do is eat them because the dragons had this huge telepathic connection going on, and the Fae were these chaotic, capricious creatures, and they couldn't stand against that kind of organization. So these heretical, here comes back to the heresy part. We already have the dragons, now we got the heresy. So this heretical group of elves, Alfar and Winterfey, got together and did a couple of things. One is they created the elves, the actual elf player character elves, were the creations by mixing with Fey blood with humans deliberately as foot soldiers, because they're hobgoblins and goblins and ogres and trolls, and those guys weren't cutting it against the dragon hordes. They needed something more creative, more magical, more flexible, and so they made the elves. Then later on, that same group said, you know what, this isn't working. We're still getting our butts kicked. So they broke the ley lines. They broke all the leyfairth. The leyfairth is a Norse word that means journey or crossing. Leyfairth is a ley crossing, and those are important because on the leyfairth, the dragons sleep. Also on the leyfairth, you can enchant magic items permanently. That ability has been lost when the leyfairth were shattered. And once the ley line crossings were shattered, the dragons lost their psychic capability. That was a side effect of sleeping on the ley crossing. They didn't know that. It's been lost in time. But it's one of those things where all of a sudden the odds changed. And now the Fae and the dragons were much more equal. The dragons were fighting each other as much as they were, and the empire fell. So blah, 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 world building. The point is, from the Torungar perspective, from the realm of humans and Vikings, is that they're constrained on three sides. And Tanalorr was way too dangerous. It's populated by Ethla folk, lizard folk, kobolds, and which I may have renamed recently. To see, I've been using Google Translate and Icelandic and some help from the very, 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 very friendly people on the Iceland Reddit. I've never seen a language with more tenses. It's crazy, but I don't use them because that would just be mean. But to make things sound better, these I've had to rewrite all the monsters, right? Because the SRD doesn't have monster descriptions; it just has stats. So everything that I've decided to include got a rewrite to fit the setting, and a rewrite to fit the mythology, and a rewrite to do what I needed to with the creature. But in any case, Krail needs money. Right, he's been fighting this Krail's the king. King needs money and resources, and all of the adventurers, all of the heroes and soldiery and huskarls have been pulled to the south because of this always pressing invasion, and it's been going on for 100 or 200 years. And so the kingdom is about at the end of its wits. But there's tremendous amounts of treasure and valuables and magic items and power in Tanalorr. And so Krail finally says, go north of the wall, because there has to be a wall. Go north of the wall, and if you can hack out a realm, if you can hack out a demesne of your own, and pay the duty to the king, right? The feudal duty, because it's a feudal system, more like Norway than Iceland. Iceland was very flat. But if you can pay the annual duty or the monthly duty, then you can join the peerage, which has been ossified for hundreds of years. And so that's a big opportunity. And it also keeps the adventurers busy, because otherwise, what murder hobos do in town. And so there was a reason for the culture in the world to say, go adventure. And there's a reason for every 3 feet to be a dungeon. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason to go looking underground in these places where the leyfairths used to cross for magic items and treasure. But all of this power animates the world too. So, and when the leyfairth broke, it was like you were starving a vampire, right? You had this leyfairth, you had this crossing, this magical area that had blood flowing to it, and then that blood flow was cut off. And sometimes the area just went away. Sometimes it got mad. Right, it's if you're familiar with the genius loci is the Latin term for it. Landvater is the North. There's a freaking term for the spirit of the land that gets animated by the animate magic of it. And so these land spirits, like, they create the undead. They're dead or restless, and that's where some of the animating forces for undead and why Draugr can be so powerful and whatever. So that was one of the cool things, is that when you take the Norse mythology and you combined it with the system and some of the things that I wanted to do from a adventuring motivation perspective, all of them reinforced each other.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun, and it's one of these things where I think that game masters who read this are going to look at this and say, okay, well, what can I do? Well, if I have a first or second level character, I'm going to stick them up close to the adventuring zone, and you've got bandits, you've got undead that occasionally pop up, you've got lizard folk and kobolds who may or may not be guarding an eternal elder dragon kicking around. You've got dungeons to explore filled with ridiculous danger and countless riches. You got all the great trappings of a D&D style campaign. Plus, I got permission. I mean, it's OGL, so I didn't need permission, but I got it anyway. Alex McChris of Adventure Conqueror King has a pretty nice domain building system. And while that's not appropriate for the introductory set because that's only level 1 through 5, once you get into level 6+, if I can ever get the next piece out there, if hopefully the game will do well, it's got a nifty domain building system that was modified for 5th edition from what Alex did for Adventure Conqueror King. And then, of course, by the time the deluxe set comes out, maybe Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers will be. That one's OGL too. So I mean, you can mine that for ideas.
So Doug, then let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter. If people contribute to the Kickstarter, what can they get? Are they getting a book? Are they getting this introductory set? What is it they're getting?
That's right. So what you're going to get is a single volume that has character generation, rules, and monsters. Lots and lots of monsters, because I think that your adversaries define your game to a large extent. It'll be somewhere around, I think, 250 pages. It could grow. One of the stretch goals is adding some extra content. But right now, the core stuff without monsters lays out at 150 pages. I need some maps, which I have. I need to table of context and index and stuff. So that'll grow a little bit. But you're going to get a book, and it's going to be a complete playable game in one volume. You can either pledge, I think it's $20 for the PDF, $50 gets you print and PDF. It's going to be hardcover. Initially, it's black and white, but if we hit a stretch goal of around 16,000, you can get to 16,000 with, I think, 500 backers. So it's not crazy talk, but it's, I don't need 1,000 backers to get there. I need a bit more than I've gotten in the past 2, but this is a full game, so I'm hoping it does commensurately better. But yeah, I mean, you're going to get a playable game, print and PDF. And one of the things about my Kickstarters is I don't have a lot of frills to them. You are pledging for what you are going to get. The only exception, and this is the first time I'm doing this, is that at the very highest tier, I will handcraft for you a Viking shield. And it's only for the US, because shipping the box of the size it is outside the US is crazy. But in the US, if you're interested, I will create for you a Viking shield size to you. It's an expensive pledge, but if you look at what these go for, they're nice pieces. And they're planked. It's not plywood. It's hide glue, hand carved handle, and I just made a deal that will keep the shield boss forever. My Viking martial arts instructor is also a metalsmith. He's making me authentic weight and size shield bosses. So this is going to be a pretty historical piece. And it's if you pledge for the shield, you get the game for free. But yeah, so really what you're getting is a complete game. You're getting a game that covers 4 classes. Your fighter, your barbarian, so your berserker, because you got to have berserkers, your clerics, and your wizard. So you got some magic. Interesting. No thief. There's no thief in the intro set. Why? Because thievery was dishonorable.
Sure.
And very dishonorable in Norse culture. You could kill someone and take their stuff. You could set their longhouse on fire, and as they came out, you could kill them and take their stuff. But you could not sneak in and take their stuff. That was just bad. So thieves got the axe. If you'll forgive me. So thieves got the axe, and so you got that. You got level 1 through 5, 55,000 words, or probably about 100 pages of setting specific monsters. A nifty way of generating treasure. I got some nice random number tables there that will help you. Like if you want to start at higher level, you can roll up the hordes, and so there's a fun way of generating treasure there that allows you to generate hordes and stuff randomly.
Ooh, I love me some random tables.
Yeah. There's. I'm going to do a lot more with random tables in the supporting adventure material once I finish up the Kickstarter and the product. And I got to say, I'm almost done with this, right? I should be in the next couple of days. I should be getting the laid out monsters from Michael Clark, who's been helping me out with this a great deal. He created the template for the cover in the book, and I've been doing some of the grunt work on layout. I've been working that, but I can confidently promise, very confidently, because I'm sure that in a week I could do it. The day that the money settles in Kickstarter, you will get a playable PDF via email. I could almost do it next week, so I'm positive that 6 weeks from next Tuesday, or six weeks from when Kickstarter launches, you will get your product that day as a PDF.
That's awesome.
Then we're going to let you guys play it. All the backers get to play it. You'll give me feedback. Oh, did you ever consider this edge case? Oh, crap. No, I didn't. Oh, what about this? Oh, that's awesome. Let me tweak that. Hey, how about a clarification here? Okay. Oh, you misspelled Klugenflagen, right? You misspelled that. And in Icelandic, it's really this. Oh, well, so make the changes, get it off to print, and then get you your physical copies and an updated copy of the book. This is going to be another one of those where I'm going to budget the normal amount of time post Kickstarter for whatever, but you're going to get something you can play the day that the Kickstarter's over and the money transfers. So I'm very optimistic about delivery on this one, and I really hope that enough people are as passionate about this as I am, that I can do the full color hardback Smith sewn binding that I dream of, because I want this to feel like a great book. I've taken a lot of inspiration from books like The Production Values of Symbaroum, or Shadows of Esteren, or Adventure Conqueror King. Axe is a fun book because it's if you hold it in your hand, it's a gorgeous heavy stock matte cover. The paper is 105-pound paper. It's a sewn binding, so it's indie guys can produce great books, and I want this to be lavish in terms of how it feels. I want it to be tangibly good. And so, looking as I look at my spreadsheet, because you got to have a spreadsheet if you're doing a Kickstarter. But if I look at my spreadsheet, I don't think that any of these goals are ridiculous.
Awesome. Well, I am pumped, and I cannot wait to back this thing. By the time listeners hear this, my money will already be behind your product. So I'm very, very excited for you, Doug. I know you've been working on this a long time, and you've been working super hard, and it's awesome. People should definitely check it out. Go on to Kickstarter right now, search for Dragon Heresy. There's also a direct link over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Doug, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you on the internet?
I am always available at my website, gamingballistic.com. One word. I am also, there is a Gaming Ballistic Discord channel. And I'm a little bit on Facebook, and I'm definitely you can find me on Google+. But website is the best way to start, and I can be reached real time from the Discord channel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That was a great conversation with Doug Cole. He is incredible. Go check out his Kickstarter for Dragon Heresy. Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and you can help us grow. How can you do that? Well, you can head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. Seriously, I get a lot of people tweeting me all the time saying, I can't do this. I hate Apple. I don't listen to the show through iTunes. Well, odds are your podcatcher app is using the iTunes algorithms. That's right. I'm letting you know, Frank. That's what's happening here. Steve, Phil, Jeff. All right. You know who you are. I'm talking to you, Natalie and Nicole and Rachel. You all know what's up. Head on over to iTunes, leave us a review. If you leave us a 5-star review, I will read it out loud verbatim. You can make me say anything you want, and I will credit the person who left it. And today, I'm heading over to our Australia reviews. And who do we have over in our Australia reviews? Why, nobody other than M4 Grifforty. M4 Grit4T. Anyway, their review is entitled A Light Chat Down a Deep RPG Rabbit Hole. With conversations ranging from convention etiquette, game design, industry notables, and people who are just super into tabletop gaming, this discussion podcast has a little bit of something for everyone. Unless you're into hanging severed thumbs on strings and hiding them in your ex-housemate's kitchen. Although, you know what? Who am I to judge? The podcast probably has something for you, too. It definitely does have something for you. Thank you, M4GR4T. I'm sure there's something there that I am not getting. Maybe some sort of Australian reference to Tim Tams that I don't understand. Anyway, thank you so much for your review. It means a ton. People, if you want to know what I'm doing, you can check me out over at worldbuilderblog.com and twitter.com/James Introcaso. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. You should always involve some Mountain Dew.
Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale.
A mysterious organization called the Sisters of Sorrow have swept up our three heroes, and it is up to Kara, Saye, and Arnadel to do battle with the forces of evil and financial destitution.
We shall battle with ancient lore.
Take them down with our sharp reflexes.
Hey, did you guys finish the last of the ale?
Venture Maidens is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actual play podcast featuring a cast of 4 lifelong gamers.
Kara, not now. We're recording a podcast ad.
Right. I chop it with my axe.
For gold and glory.
We post our episodes every other Sunday. We've got monsters, treasure, role-playing, a cool plot, and some strange NPCs. Find the Venture Maidens podcast today on iTunes or wherever podcasts are free. Until then, venture away.